I think working with him was the key to Pretty Woman. He gave her the room to fly. You could have got another actor who says, she's got too much to do, I want to be the star. He was lovely, and they were nice.
Pretty Woman is one of the most rewatched romantic films ever made. Polished, quoted, and trusted almost blindly. But hidden inside Vivian Ward's iconic wardrobe, worn by Julia Roberts, is a massive mistake that slipped past audiences, critics, and even fashion professionals for decades. How did millions of eyes miss the same detail? What else fades when emotion takes control? It took modern rewatch culture to catch it. So what exactly slipped, and why didn't anyone notice? The scene everyone remembers, but not like this. The answer is sitting in one of the most quoted, most rewatched, most comfort movie scenes in Pretty Woman. The kind of scene people can practically act out from memory. It happens during the I Love Lucy hotel room moment.
Makes you think I'm a lawyer.
You've got that, sharp, useless look about you.
When the movie is doing what it does best, pulling you into warmth, chemistry, and that soft, safe feeling, like you're watching a fairy tale come alive. Picture it clearly. We're in the hotel room. The air feels lighter than the rest of the film. Edward Lewis, played by Richard Gere, walks in like a man who has finally unclenched his jaw. No boardroom posture, no deal-making face, just relaxed, private, almost boyish. And Vivian Ward, Julia Roberts, is right there with that energy that makes the room feel brighter. The vibe is intimate in that gentle way, like two people surprised they're enjoying each other this much.
Okay, so I'm on an hourly rate. Could we just move along?
Somehow I'm sensing that this time problem is a major issue with you.
Do you remember it that way? Like the scene is almost floating? Then Vivian steps closer. She starts loosening Edward's tie, not in a dramatic movie seduction way, but in that playful, curious way she does everything. Her fingers pull the knot, and you can see it. The tie is loosening. He's letting her. It's a tiny act, but it signals comfort. It's the movie saying, these two are closing the distance. And it's working, because most people watching are not scanning for details at this point. They're feeling the moment. Now, here's where the hidden tear opens. There's a cut, quick and normal, the kind you don't even notice because the scene is flowing. But when the shot returns, Edward's tie is suddenly tied again. Fully back in place, neat like nothing happened. And if you're watching casually, your brain tries to smooth it over. Maybe he fixed it. Maybe time passed. Maybe the camera angle is tricking you. But then it cuts again, and the tie is undone again, like a little time loop you were never meant to see. Let that sink in. Vivian loosens the tie. Cut. It's tied. Cut. It's undone again. How many times have you seen this movie? Once? 5 times? 10? And if you have watched it that many times, how did your brain never raise its hand and go, wait, what just happened? This is not a blink and miss moment. That's what makes it so wild. If you pause, rewind, and watch the sequence like you're doing slow-motion playback, it becomes almost comical. The tie is basically teleporting between shots. 1 second it's relaxed and loose, the next it's perfectly knotted, then it's loose again. It's a classic continuity error, a wardrobe mistake hiding inside romance. And the craziest part is where it happens, right in the sweet spot of the film, right where the audience is most emotionally invested. That's the trick. The movie isn't asking you to notice fabric and knots. It's asking you to notice the feeling. It's asking you to watch two people fall into something unexpected. So your attention goes to their faces, their body language, the music, the intimacy, not the tie. So ask yourself this. If a pretty obvious Pretty Woman wardrobe mistake can hide in plain sight for decades, what else are we missing in scenes we know by heart? And if this moment is so repeatable today, why didn't anyone catch it back in 1990? Why nobody saw it in 1990? Because in 1990, your brain was not watching Pretty Woman like a detective. It was watching it like a believer. Back then, Most people first met this movie in a theater, or later on TV or on a VHS tape that someone recorded and labeled with shaky handwriting. And in those worlds, you did not pause like you do now. You did not rewind 10 seconds, freeze the frame, zoom in, and then replay it again just to prove a point. The movie moved forward, and you moved with it. That matters because continuity mistakes like the tie thing do not usually scream. They whisper, they slip through cuts while you are busy feeling the scene. And that is the real answer here. The human brain prioritizes emotion over mechanics. When we are emotionally invested, we trade tiny details for the bigger story. We do it without noticing, like our minds are saying, "I'll take the romance, you keep the tie." Think about that hotel room moment again. The scene is designed like a soft trap. It pulls your attention to Vivian's face, her energy, the playful intimacy, the way Edward relaxes around her. Your eyes naturally follow what feels important. And what feels important is the connection. So even if the tie does a little magic trick between cuts, your brain explains it away. Have you ever missed something obvious because you were fully locked into the emotion of a moment? And it is not just romance movies. It happens in real life, too.
Don't you just love Prince?
More than life itself.
Don't you knock?
Vivian,
You can drive home and barely remember the turns you took because your mind was thinking about a conversation. You can watch a friend tell a story and miss what they are holding in their hands. Your attention is like a spotlight. When it shines on one thing, other things go dim. That is not you being careless. That is your brain being efficient. In 1990, that spotlight had even fewer tools. Today, rewatch culture is a whole sport. People make hidden details compilations. Fans trade screenshots. Someone pauses a scene, circles a detail, uploads it, and suddenly the whole internet is looking at a tie like it is evidence in a court case. But back then, even if you noticed something weird, what would you do? Call your friend and say, "I think Edward's tie retied itself." They would laugh, and the movie would keep being the movie.
you have anything in this shop as beautiful as she is?
Oh, yes. Oh, no. No, I'm saying we have...
So the mistake survives because the viewing environment helped it survive. No instant replay, no comments section, no "let me show you real quick," just one flowing experience. And that is exactly what filmmakers rely on, even if they do not say it out loud. Movies are built on motion. They are designed to feel smooth even when they are stitched together from different takes. Now let's talk about the part most people do not think about. Editing. A continuity error can exist in the footage, but it only becomes real when the editor chooses those exact shots and puts them back to back. So why would that happen? Usually, because the performance is perfect. The chemistry is working. The timing is right. The emotion lands. And when a scene is doing its job, everyone involved is more likely to forgive small visual jumps if the bigger feeling stays intact. That is why continuity mistakes are often found in the best scenes, not the boring ones. Nobody rewatches the forgettable moments 100 times, but fans replay the iconic scenes constantly. And that means the mistakes hide for years, then get exposed when technology and culture change. Are we better viewers today, or are we just more suspicious? Here's the funniest part. The tie mistake feels obvious now because you know to look for it. Once your brain tags it as important, you cannot unsee it. It becomes the first thing you notice, like a scratch on a brand new phone screen. That is why modern viewers catch it faster. Not because we are smarter, but because we watch differently. We watch with pause buttons, with rewind habits, and with "did you see that" energy. But now comes the twist that makes this even more satisfying. This is not a sloppy movie that does not care about clothes. This movie was obsessed with wardrobe perfection, right down to the details that made Vivian's transformation iconic. So how did a mistake like this slip through anyway? The woman who made the wardrobe untouchable. And that twist matters, because Pretty Woman was not a good enough wardrobe movie. It was a wardrobe movie. The kind where clothes do not just sit on the characters, they talk. They tell you who has power, who is pretending, who is dreaming, and who is finally becoming. The person who built that whole visual story was the costume designer, Marilyn Vance. If you have ever watched Pretty Woman and felt like Vivian's transformation was almost a second plot line,
Sir? Evening, Edward. Wonderful news.
Hey, come here. You gotta look at this.
that was not an accident. Marilyn designed the wardrobe like a blueprint, not for fashion trends, for character change. Think about how Vivian first appears. The look is loud, layered, and chaotic on purpose. The boots feel like armor.
So, do you have a wife? Girlfriend?
Both.
Where are they?
The cutouts and bright pieces feel like a warning sign and a survival strategy at the same time. It is not random sexy. It is a character saying, "This is how I move through the world, and I'm not here to be judged." And then the movie starts changing her environment, slowly, step by step, and the clothes shift with her. Here's the genius part. Vivian's style does not become rich. It becomes clearer. The shapes get cleaner. The colors get calmer. The lines get more elegant. It is like the wardrobe is gently turning down the noise so you can finally see her. Can clothing tell a character's entire story without a single line of dialogue? And that is why the outfits in this film became such a big part of pop culture. People still talk about the big mistake, huge shopping scene. Because the dress is part of the power. That white look is not just pretty. It is a comeback in fabric form. It is Vivian walking back into a space that rejected her and saying, "You judged the outside and you were wrong." Then you get the polo match outfit, the one that feels playful but polished. It is still Vivian.
Miss Olsen sisters who have made marrying well an art form.
Edward.
Be back just like, hold on.
But now she is learning the rules of a new world and bending them in her own way. And then, like the movie is saving its final card for the table, we arrive at the opera. That red dress moment is basically a movie legend at this point. It is not just an outfit. It is the scene where Vivian steps into the room, and the room has to deal with her. The wild behind-the-scenes detail is that the studio originally wanted that opera dress to be black because black felt safe and controlled. But Marilyn pushed for red, and not just any red. She tested shades, treated it like a strategy, and fought for the color that would make Vivian impossible to ignore. And honestly, she was right. Red does something on screen. It pulls focus. It broadcasts confidence. It tells the audience, "Look at her now." Would this movie work the same way without its wardrobe? Or would the whole transformation feel less believable? This is why the tie mistake feels almost insulting when you spot it, because it clashes with what we know about how carefully this film was built. Marilyn Vance was not throwing outfits together and hoping for the best. The wardrobe was coordinated, planned, tested, and used like a storytelling tool. Vivian's looks were designed to evolve in a way viewers could feel, even if they could not explain it. So when you see Edward's tie magically reset between cuts, it creates a strange little crack in the perfection. Not a huge crack, but enough to make you ask a deeper question. If the wardrobe department was this intentional, and the movie cared this much about visual storytelling, how did a single tie escape all that control? The tie that wasn't meant to matter. And that's what makes it so strange, right? We're talking about a film where the wardrobe was basically sacred. A movie where every button, every hemline, and every color choice was treated like story DNA. So how did a single tie escape all that control? Here's the quiet answer that makes the whole thing click. Because not everything iconic in Pretty Woman was custom-made. Costume designer Marilyn Vance was famously hands-on, and she's talked about how her team created almost everything you see on screen. But she also admitted there were a couple of exceptions, including the tie Vivian wears in that bold, flirty, nothing but a tie moment when Edward comes back to the hotel. And that detail matters more than it sounds, because when something is custom, it gets treated like evidence in a high-security case. It gets tagged, tracked, photographed, and guarded like a small country's crown jewels. It has a custom number. It has backups. It has notes. If a sleeve rolls up a little too high between takes, somebody notices. But when something is just a tie, a basic piece, not tailored to the story, not built from scratch, not part of Vivian's transformation blueprint, it becomes the kind of object that floats around a set like a stray balloon. 1 second, it's on Richard Gere's neck. The next second, it's off, tossed on a chair, picked up by someone who's trying to help, and retied because it looks neat, then undone again because the scene needs intimacy. And you can feel the chaos hiding under the calm because that hotel room scene is not just two people talking. It's blocking, timing, camera angles, wardrobe resets, hair touches, lighting tweaks, and performance, all happening at once. So yes, the irony is painful in the best way. A movie built on luxury illusion gets cracked by a tiny, ordinary prop, and it's not even because people didn't care. It's because people cared about bigger things first. Continuity supervisors, wardrobe teams, and directors usually focus on major silhouettes, the things your brain reads instantly. Vivian's boots versus her opera gown. The bold street look versus clean elegance. Edward's sleek businessman uniform. Those are the headline visuals. But neckwear lives in the footnote zone, especially in a scene like this, where the emotional temperature is doing the heavy lifting. You're not watching a knot, you're watching a vibe. Let me ask you something. If you're watching this scene for the 100th time, what do you remember most? Is it the exact position of a tie, or the feeling of two people getting comfortable around each other? That's why this mistake is so sneaky. It's hiding in the exact place where filmmakers expect your attention to soften. And here's the part that really stings if you love movie secrets. This was the one scene where a tie should have been treated like a main character, because Vivian unties it with intention. It's not background, it's flirtation. It's her taking control of Edward's world for a second. The tie is basically a symbol of his buttoned-up identity loosening. So when it suddenly reappears neatly tied again, the symbolism accidentally resets too, like the movie briefly forgets its own heartbeat. Do small details matter this much? Or is this proof that perfection is always fragile, even in a movie that feels like it was polished with velvet gloves? And maybe the wildest part is this: the mistake doesn't ruin the scene. It doesn't break the romance. It doesn't destroy the fantasy. It just shows you the seam. That's what a great continuity error really is. Not a gotcha, more like a tiny rip in the wallpaper that reminds you there's a whole room behind it, full of people moving fast, making choices, trying to keep the dream alive. But there's a deeper reason this scene broke continuity, and it has nothing to do with laziness or cheap props. So what was happening in that room that made the tie almost impossible to control? Performance first. Why the error survived editing? Because what was happening in that room was not fully controlled. That sounds dramatic, but it's actually the most respectful explanation. Some scenes are choreographed down to the millisecond. This one had something else going on. Real chemistry, real timing, and the kind of loose energy directors secretly pray for. When a scene is alive like that, continuity becomes a little harder to police because the actors are not moving like robots. They're reacting. And Pretty Woman had a director who openly valued reaction over perfect mechanics. Gary Marshall wasn't chasing a museum display, he was chasing a feeling. If you've ever watched this movie and thought, why does it feel so warm and easy? A big part of that is his style. He let moments breathe, even if that meant tiny details shifted between takes. Here's a behind-the-scenes detail that puts the tie problem in a whole new light. In the film, Julia Roberts' laughter during the I Love Lucy watching scene wasn't a perfectly planned performance beat. It was unrehearsed, sparked on set in a way that made her laugh for real. When you have a director who's willing to do whatever it takes to capture a genuine laugh, that tells you everything about his priorities.
And she laughed so honestly that we left it in the picture.
Do you want the knot on a tie to be perfect, or do you want the audience to fall in love with the moment? Now, zoom out to the editing room, because that's where continuity errors either die or survive like little movie gremlins hiding in the final cut. Editors don't choose the take where the tie is correct. They choose to take where the emotion lands. The take where Vivian's smile feels like it has a heartbeat. The take where Edward's body language reads relaxed, safe, and curious. The take where the chemistry feels effortless. And in a movie like Pretty Woman, chemistry is not a bonus feature. It is the engine. So imagine the editor's choice. Option 1 is a technically perfect take, where the tie stays consistent, but the timing is slightly flatter. Option 2 is the take where the room feels electric. Vivian's playful confidence is at its peak. Edward's reaction is just right, and the audience feels like they're peeking into something private. Which one makes the final cut? Let me ask you honestly, would you sacrifice perfection for authenticity if it meant the scene hit harder? And if you were editing a romantic comedy that lives or dies on charm, would you really toss your best emotional take just because a tie resets itself? This is how continuity breaks become acceptable. Not because people didn't notice, people probably did notice. But the mistake was small, and the performance was huge. In filmmaking, that trade happens more than fans realize. It's not laziness, it's triage. Keep what matters most, and hope the tiny stuff stays invisible. And here's where modern viewers get spicy about it. Today, studios can digitally fix little things like this. They can smooth out a wardrobe glitch, clean up a reflection, and even adjust a prop between cuts. But should they? If you polish away every imperfection, do you lose the human texture that made the scene work in the first place? Which brings us to the real turning point in this story, because for years, that tie slipped through the cracks like it was protected by the movie's own charm. So, when did people finally notice the mistake? The internet finds the tie. And this is where the mistake stops being a private little hiccup in the editing room and turns into a public sport. Because in 1990, most people experienced Pretty Woman the same way you experience a dream. You watched it once in theaters, maybe again months later on TV, and the movie just flowed. The romance, the fantasy, the chemistry between Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, that warm glow of what if life could change overnight. Your brain wasn't scanning for a necktie like it was a clue at a crime scene. Then rewatches became forensic. When DVDs arrived, the entire relationship changed. Suddenly, you could pause. You could rewind. You could hit the same moment again and again until your popcorn got cold. And humans are wired for patterns. The second you realize something is off, your brain becomes obsessed with confirming it. Have you ever paused a movie just because your brain whispered, "Wait, was that there a second ago?" And once you see it, you can't unsee it, right? That's the exact environment where sites like Movie Mistakes thrive, because they turned casual viewing into a community hobby. The site has been around since the early days of the internet, built on people submitting details, getting them checked, and sometimes backed up with screenshots. It's basically the internet's filing cabinet for continuity chaos. And once something like the Pretty Woman tie error is logged, it doesn't disappear. It just waits, like a little time capsule labeled "Open when humans get even more online." Now add modern culture to the mix. We live in an era where nostalgia is content. People don't just rewatch old movies, they remix them. They clip them into short videos. They react to them. They do first-time watching recordings. They do deep dives titled things you never noticed. And the algorithm loves anything that feels like a hidden level in a game. The tie mistake fits perfectly because it's easy to explain, quick to show, and satisfying to spot. It's not a complicated theory. It's a clean little win you can point to and say, "See? I caught it." But here's the funny part. The tie isn't just a continuity error. It's a symbol of how we watch now. Back then, movies were designed for feeling. Today, they're also consumed like puzzles. We freeze frames the way people used to freeze memories. We treat romance scenes like evidence. We value being the person who notices the tiny thing everyone missed. So let me ask you this. Are we better viewers now, or just more distracted viewers with better tools? And when you catch something like that tie, does it make the movie worse, or does it make it feel even more real? Because the mistake resurfaces now for one reason. It's shareable. It's the kind of detail you can drop in a group chat and sound smart without sounding paranoid. It's a receipt that proves even the most polished Hollywood fantasy has fingerprints on it. And honestly, that's kind of comforting. The movie is still iconic. The wardrobe is still legendary. The chemistry still works. Yet one small slip survives, traveling from VHS-era innocence all the way into the pause and zoom age. So maybe the tie isn't just a mistake. Maybe it's proof that perfection was never the point. And the thing we're really watching is how humans choose emotion over precision, until the internet hands them a magnifying glass and dares them to look closer. But if that's true, what bigger thing does this mistake actually reveal about us? The unseen snag in a fairy tale. And this is where the tie stops being just a tie and starts feeling like a tiny crack in a glass slipper. Because if you zoom out, Pretty Woman is basically a polished dream with sharp edges hiding underneath. It is a fairy tale that knows it is cheating a little, and it gets away with it because the emotion is so strong. Vivian walks into a world of money, rules, and spotless surfaces, and for a while the movie lets us pretend those surfaces are stable. But the truth is, they are not. They never were. So when that tie breaks continuity for a second, it almost feels like the movie is accidentally telling on itself. Here's the careful part, and I want to frame it the right way. I am not saying the filmmakers did it on purpose. I am saying the effect for us as viewers is weirdly perfect. That tiny wardrobe mistake becomes a metaphor by accident, the way real life always does. Have you ever had a moment where everything looked put together, and then one tiny detail betrayed the whole performance? A lipstick stain on a perfect cup. A button is missing on the big day. A smile that slips for half a second. Because Vivian's transformation was never actually about becoming flawless. It was about becoming seen. The clothes are the language she borrows to move through a space that was not designed for her. And that is why the wardrobe matters so much, and why people still talk about it decades later. The story sells us elegance, but it also sells us tension. The audience can feel it, even if they cannot name it. So let me ask you something. Does imperfection make a story feel more believable, or does it pull you out of the fantasy? This is also why the tie glitch hits harder than other continuity errors. It happens in a world that is trying to look expensive, controlled, and intentional. Everything about Edward's image is curated. Everything about the hotel world is curated. Even Vivian's glow-up is curated. So when a small, ordinary piece like a tie cannot stay consistent, it becomes this quiet reminder that the perfect world is held together by human hands. And human hands miss things, and that idea connects to something people forget about this movie. The story people remember is glossy, but the story it started was not. Early versions of the script were darker, and even the title was different. It was built from rougher material before it got wrapped in romance. So maybe it makes sense that a tiny snag survived in the final cut. Maybe the movie never fully erased its earlier shadows. Maybe it just dressed them better. Now imagine how cold this movie would feel if it truly were flawless. If every hair, every fold, and every prop were digitally corrected until it looked like an ad. Would you still believe the characters? Or would you feel the invisible hand polishing everything until it stopped feeling human? And if we can forgive one wardrobe mistake because the scene lands emotionally, what does that say about how we actually watch films? Because in the end, that tie does not ruin the fairy tale. It reminds you of the fairy tale being performed by real people in real time. It is a glitch that makes the dream feel touchable, like you could step into it and leave fingerprints. And maybe that is why it keeps resurfacing online, not just as a gotcha, but as a tiny, satisfying proof that perfection is fragile. So when you see it now, on a rewatch, do you treat it like a mistake, or do you treat it like a reminder? That's why nobody caught it for years. Vivian Ward, played by Julia Roberts, is glowing.
What a beautiful night to be an artist. This is 2026. We're going straight to the top on this.
Edward is charming, and our eyes chase the emotion, not the fabric. Yet, in that key moment, Edward's tie resets unnaturally as it jumps between beats. It was missed because performance mattered more than mechanics, and rewatch culture had not turned films into pause and proof puzzles. Did this change how you see the movie? What other films hide glitches? Like, subscribe and comment, or did we?